So tell us what happened, or what do you know about the weekend, the state response, the horrible loss of life for our state troopers, what with that helicopter going down? I mean, take us behind the scenes. Take us behind the scenes.
Pilot Bates and Lieutenant Cullen, well known to us because they fly the governor, and oftentimes I travel with the governor, and so Lieutenant Cullen and then Trooper Bates had actually been on the Executive Protection Unit before he chose to get into the aviation unit, and so very well known to the governor and First Lady and all of us, and so that is just devastating. It's just it's beyond sad, and particularly coming so soon after Trooper Walter and Trooper Durmeyer. And the state police family has really had some tremendous losses, and I know Virginians support them, and so it's really a loss for all of us. With respect to Charlottesville, we with the State Police Fusion Center giving us intel for weeks now, they had been communicating with Charlottesville Police Department regularly. I mean, this was a coordinated effort. We had briefed the governor twice last week with our public safety officials, Colonel Flaherty, General Williams from the National Guard, and State Emergency Coordinator Jeff Stern and myself, and we would brief the governor on what we knew and what preparations to take, and he said, you got everything at your disposal. We provided the colonel as many state troopers as he could safely deploy to Charlottesville, and then we also mobilized the National Guard. Military police unit was doing a drill, and we had them deployed to Charlottesville. So we put all available resources to it because the intelligence indicated that this was going to be had certainly the potential for violence. The alt-right rally is composed of some individuals who spew forth real hateful rhetoric and call for violence, and so we have to prepare for the worst and hope for the best. And so as the things just proceeded along, I was there Friday. The colonel told me that there was a torchlight vigil going on in the UVA, so I ran over to the rotunda and saw for myself what happened there. That was pretty dramatic. You had about 300 individuals carrying torches, yelling "White Lives Matter," and then you had some students forming a circle around the Jefferson Monument, and that ended up in a confrontation, a violent confrontation, torches being thrown in the air, pushing and shoving. And then they left. It didn't last long.
How long was that taking? And was it just totally surreal for you?
It was surreal. I mean, it was unbelievable, Chris. I mean, I never seen anything like it. In fact, as I stood there and watched, turns out Larry Sabato, you know the professor from
very well,
UVA, was standing next to me. I said, "Oh my gosh, Larry!" And he said, "Brian, I've been here for 47 years. I've never seen anything this disgusting." One group's yelling "White Lives Matter," and then there's a small contingent of students, I don't know, maybe a dozen of them yelling "Black Lives Matter," and of course, from my perspective, I leave the politics to others in this capacity, in my position now, so I'm just looking at safety, and those are real torches,
right?
And people can get hurt with that, and so there was some fisticuffs there, some scuffles, but they left. Some police arrived. They seem to have they left. It didn't last long.
How long?
Just a few minutes, actually.
Wow. That's all it takes, though, isn't it? That's all it takes to incite a riot.
No question about that. No question. But the pushing, shoving, and then they left. But then we were very concerned. Where were they going to reassemble? And in fact, I went back to my hotel. At that point, it was about 10:30, 11 o'clock, and a lot of the tactical team, I stayed at the same hotel. They were leaving the hotel, and so I expressed that only because these guys and guys and gals were all weekend. I mean, I don't know if they got any sleep at all this weekend. It's just, I'm just so proud of all of our law enforcement and that TAC team. You know, they have to put all on their riot gear, and of course Saturday it was a hot, muggy day, and you know the patience that they exhibited and the restraint is, you know, frankly, you know, really amazing. So that's Friday night, and of course Saturday morning I went to the training. It was at 7 a.m. at an off-site location. They briefed all of the TAC team. Of course, they had been doing training Thursday and Friday. There was the week before there was training over at the police academy in Chesterfield that I was observed, and they, you know, at that point they were trying the equipment on. They went through the procedures, what their expectations was, the plan. So a lot of preparation that went into this, and then so Saturday morning arrives, and we are at the park, and people started assembling. I was there at the park, and people started assembling early, about 8:30. Of course, it wasn't even supposed to start until noon,
right? And
extend until 5. And at that point, you could almost tell that this thing wasn't going well. I mean, about 9:30, I'd say a group of militiamen showed up, full gear.
That wasn't helpful.
I sent pictures to the governor, and at first you'd think they were military, you know, and they weren't. I mean, they were a private militia, and I approached many of them. I spoke to them, and they were there to protect the Second Amendment and the First Amendment. But, you know, you introduced large military-style assault rifles into this mix. I mean, it was, you know, so it was...
Is that, I mean, you're a former prosecutor. You served on courts of justice for years in the General Assembly. Can you openly carry an assault rifle like that?
You can open carry in the Commonwealth. That is correct. Yeah.
With a you know, an AR-15 and the like.
Yeah.
Okay.
Illegal. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. So.
Well, I mean, I think that you're going to see some legislation this year about whether or not you'll remember the days of our good former friend Chip Woodrum used to try to ban guns in Roanoke City, and I think. There'll be some efforts at legislation this year to, you know, because what was going on here, Chris, and you know, you got Second Amendment rights, you got First Amendment rights, a real clash. But you know, I'm looking at this from public safety, and that's my position. So I'm gonna err on the side of public safety. And when you introduce those types of assault weapons into a mix that was already very volatile, I mean, this is a volatile group that was assembling and. So anyway, but moving on from that, I mean so they started going, and then the alt-right groups, the many different groups started arriving. The white shirts, different flags. So there were different groups that they identify with, and they all started assembling on the park. And then some clergy arrived to pray, and then you started getting a lot of groups standing on Market Street. And let me just back up a minute. We did not want it at Emancipation Park.
Why is that?
You know,
let me back it up. Let me back it up for our audience, those of you who are just joining. This is Brian Moran, Secretary of Public Safety, who was on site, basically the point man for the governor. I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but you were the guy. A lot of training going on beforehand with the state police and the National Guard weeks leading up to this, briefing the governor. Brian was in the House of Delegates for, 16 years, Brian?
13.
13 years, and is now the Secretary of Public Safety. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, so we did not want it at Emancipation Park. We could foresee that it was a small park, and the groups that were protesting could be over 600 to 700 people. As it turns out, I'd estimated about 1,000 people were actually in the park. So we didn't know how many would actually come, and they came. And so we knew the park was too small, and essentially urban warfare. I mean, we were a block from the mall. I'm sure you and your listeners are familiar with Charlottesville and the downtown mall with shops and pedestrians.
Oh, yeah.
Beautiful mall. And we were very concerned that where would the protesters go? Where would the individuals who were counter-protesting, where would they go? how would this shape up, because it just was too small of a venue. And the city, much to their credit, said, no, we're going to move this to McIntyre Park based on the intelligence we've received. And they tried, and there was a lawsuit Friday, and the city lost at about, I think the opinion came out about 9:30 that night. And, what we foresaw occur, I mean, we made absolutely the best plans possible. We, the fighting ensued. I just to walk you through the TikTok, so at about 10 o'clock, I'm still at the mall. People are showing up. Again, it wasn't even supposed to start until 12. About 10 o'clock, large groups were showing up. And the alt-right, many of the groups, I mean, they came with shields, with 10-foot poles. And, you could argue they're flag poles, but they're long and metal and thick. They came with not only shields, but helmets. They were ready
to fight
for a fight. Yeah. And so, you knew this just wasn't going to go well. And so at that point, I got a call about 10:30 now from the chief of staff saying, on television there looks like there's fights. Now I was at one corner, and I couldn't see the fight. And there was a lot of shouting. A lot back and forth, because as the alt-right groups would enter the park, there was large groups of protesters screaming at them. So there was a lot going back and forth, a lot of ugly verbal confrontations. But once the chief told me that there was fighting on television, I ran up to our command center, which was in a building close by that overlooked the park, and we had the 6th floor for the command center. And so I was. Enough. Some fights started breaking up, and there was fighting, and then it would break up, it separate, and then so this went on for a little bit, and we had police all around to try to keep the groups apart, but it was impossible at that point, because the folks stood right there at Market Street, right next to the park, and so there was no room for people to walk in and out, and so when people would try to get to the park for the 12 o'clock rally, there'd be confrontation. So, bottles were being thrown back and forth. Sporadic fighting, and so about 11:22, I called the governor. Of course, the colonel was there, the chief of police. This was a command center, a unified command, we call it, So Colonel Flaherty and the chief of police were obviously.
This could have gotten so bad so quickly.
I would agree. I would agree. So we moved, and so unlawful assembly was called at.
Oh, really?
11? It was called, and we had to give people time to leave, disperse. Which, to the credit, the majority did. Once we called that. People left, but not everybody, and our tactical team moved the park out in moments. I mean, it went as according to plan. It was just you had, 1,000 alt-right folks. You had that number, maybe twice that, yelling at them, and it was back and forth. So it was a very, very challenging situation for law enforcement. I got to tell you, they did an amazing. Just an incredible job under the circumstances. Just couldn't be more proud of them.
Yeah, I mean, to think about the number of people who were there, the weaponry that was there, the manner in which people approached this event, the reason they showed up on both sides, a fight was going to break out one way or the other, it seemed like. And to have, as tragic as it was, to have the car plow into the crowd, to have that lady die, 32-year-old. Lady, and then the 2 state troopers who were really not in the fight. They were, I believe, helicoptering away or going. You can probably tell us more about that. But to have, it could have gotten so much worse. And hats off to you. Hats off to the governor for deploying what they had to do, for taking the time to prepare in advance for this, and people often lose sight of that in our political world these days. What goes on in government every single day to protect the public, as your role as Secretary of Public Safety. So my hat's off to you, my good friend, for the work you did to keep this as minimized as possible, even though it was tragic in its outcome.
Well, the car. Frankly, I was just watching. It's an act of terrorism. But the authorities investigating that, and we'll let that proceed. Obviously, the helicopter. We had 2 helicopters in the air so that we could get good footage of what was happening. In fact, I believe a lot of the footage with respect to that car accident, act of terrorism, whatever you want to call it, was will be due to those helicopters, and so they were providing an essential public safety, law enforcement activity, and it's just horrible what happened to them. And with respect to the car, that happened several blocks from the park.
Right. I know exactly where it is. I saw the pictures. I'm like, I have parked my delivery van right there. I know exactly where it is. I know exactly. Yeah. It's awful because you can't really drive through there.
Well, you have to drive through the mall, and he drove through the mall, struck the vehicle, struck numerous individuals, and then backed up past the mall again. I mean, it's amazing. More people weren't struck as he backed out. He backed out about 3 blocks to Water Street and then drove off and eventually pulled over and apprehended by the police. So, and that was a few blocks from it. And, there were skirmishes all over the city at that point. And that, frankly, that's what we were worried about.
Spreading this
how are you going to police an entire city? I mean, it's urban warfare. I mean, groups would assemble, and then you had the alt-right groups, and who's going to how are they going to get to the parking lots? How are they going to get to the cars? Are you going to have individual people mobbed? Those are the concerns we were facing, and again, absolutely credit Charlottesville Police Department, obviously State Police. We also had the National Guard. What happened, once we cleared the park, we put the National Guard in the park so that they would protect the park, and we sent our tactical teams out into the city to respond to the fights and various acts of violence. And not a pane of glass was broken, Chris, which is, considering what was going on, no property damage, no allegations of police brutality. There were 33 people injured, 20 of them from that vehicle, which, frankly, was unforeseeable. I guess you obviously prepare for the worst, but for him to do that is just horrible. But 20 individuals were hurt from, and one obviously killed. Miss Hyder, which
Brian, do we have in the Code of Virginia? Do we have something that defines acts of terrorism?
We do. We worked on that after 9/11, since Pentagon was the subject of the act of terrorism. We worked on that, and there is a definition. The FBI was there, talked to Special Agent Lee that evening. They are working on it. You want to bring the charges that are most appropriate, and frankly, from my point of view, the most harsh. But right now the state charges are second-degree murder. And
what is that? What for the uninformed, including myself? Thank you for not going to law school. What is second-degree murder in Virginia?
It's punishable by life.
No. What's the definition?
Is not first degree is premeditated. So the idea here would be that as he was driving, he had the notion to cause a harm and kill someone. So that's second degree. Now, if we can prove that he had the intention to kill somebody from the get-go, from the beginning, then that's first degree. That's premeditated.
So if something in his Facebook post or something said, I'm going to go kill someone, that could go to premeditation?
There you go. That's it. Yeah.
Brian Moran joining us. Brian, coming up on a hard break.
In jail, and so that's the initial charge. But before you indict, you could change the charge, and that's why there's an investigation ongoing. Right. They're going to be looking at his Facebook posts, social media, and he was in the crowd. He is pictured in the crowd. He was there that morning as a alt-right protester. So, and there's that's the investigation going on. But right now, you don't want to throw a charge on him so that he's in jail, and he'll stay in jail until this investigation concludes.
Brian, thanks for joining us. Secretary Brian Moran, who was on point for the Commonwealth of Virginia, the governor. This is the Secretary of Public Safety, a former member of the House of Delegates. Brian Moran joining us by phone on his way to Newport News to do some more training. Brian, thank you so much for your work in quelling the violence and keeping it to.
Well, I talked to Colonel this morning, and we're worried. This is the new norm, and so we're going to need the resources, the best trained, equipped law enforcement possible, and we just could not be more proud of our state police and Charlottesville PD, what they did this weekend. But this is going to become the new norm, and we're going to have to, as a society and folks, going to have to figure out how to respond to this. It's very troubling what happened on Saturday, the hate, the violence, and unfortunately, I think we're just going to have to start. This is the new norm.
Well, working together, we can stop that. Thanks for joining us, Brian.
Agreed.
Appreciate it, my friend.